The Halloween party where I met the love of my life, part 2. I remember the moment Hugh held my hand on New Year's Eve and told me I wouldn't be alone next year. I had sardonically laughed at the comment because he was the guy I had so meanly behaved with. Hugh, my first boyfriend, would help me find my second boyfriend. Even though I was worried about everything from the top to the bottom and east to the west, I hoped it wouldn't be a batshit crazy process. Who wanted to find their lover in a mess? Certainly I, William Smith, did not want that. I'd had enough of that, but that didn't mean my fate and my heart would follow that command. Planning our vacations to a beach of all places was Hugh's idea. Even according to Edward, he believed the milder surroundings would do us good in the winter. I honestly had no idea how to respond to that, but none of that mattered when we were already here. The first thing that greeted me, besides people, was the cool winds. Thankfully, I had my jacket on, and it saved me the problems that Edward was currently dealing with. When the winds got cooler, Hugh told me that Edward and him were gonna go and roll in for the night. I bid them farewell. Our luggage was already in our respective rooms, so I didn't need to worry about them. I wrapped my jacket around myself and strolled around the fairly empty beachside. I could see families, and I could see lovers, and my desperate eyes searched for nothing but a single man, as pathetic as I sounded. And so I plugged in my AirPods, got out my slippers, and walked barefoot on the sand as a hopeless romantic. It felt a little cool under my feet, but I didn't mind. It was true. I had watched way too many romantic movies. 5 minutes passed and I had no human contact with any potentially single gay men. With a disappointed sigh, I checked my phone for any notifications. Thankfully, I had received several from Hugh, who declared that he and Edward had found a way to make this evening wilder, and they wanted me to come and meet them in their room. I replied that I'd be there in 10 minutes. In the minutes before I would leave for whatever plans my friends had made, I decided to challenge my luck again, and I did what any loser romantic would do. I kept my head low and walked straight with the hope that I would just stumble into a handsome man who would make a perfect boyfriend for me. I thought it'd be nice stumbling into a young man like that, but luck just was not on my side. Because the man I did stumble into turned out to be an old man with an age of annoyance on his shoulders. He shrieked at me and threatened to hit me with his stick. Because it was my mistake, I did my best to apologize. "I'm sorry," I said for the 10th time. I needed to get away from there before I made a fool out of myself. We planned to stay here for a little more than a month, and I certainly didn't want people to have a bad impression of me. But then, as fate would have it, I turned and stumbled into something else. This seemed like a solid wall to me, and I nearly wondered who put a darn wall in the middle of a beach, until the wall spoke and said, "I hope you're not hurt." Well, it wasn't a wall. I was flat on my bum when the man stretched out a hand for me to take. It personally hurt that this man looked so shockingly handsome. His face made sense on a billboard, but his outfit told me that he was no more than a man doing his 9-to-5 job. He was dressed in a form-fitting white shirt and pants, his tie was loose around his neck, and so was the hair on his head. He looked carefree. Now that was a combination I'd often dreamt about. "I hope it didn't hurt," the man repeated and pulled me up. When I got up, I was only a little distance away from him. I could smell the chocolate in his breath, and I wondered if his kisses tasted the same. But then I regained a hold of my senses and put some distance between us. My phone vibrated with several notifications. I knew that Hugh and Edward must have been waiting for me. I began, "Thanks for giving me a hand." "No problem," the man said, and when he smiled, his dimple appeared. That was a fascinating sight, and I realized I needed to get the heck out of there. I apologize, though, for that. I made a shape in the air with my finger. It literally meant nothing, but the man followed the pattern as if in a trance. "I get it," he answered and looked into my eyes. "You gotta be careful." "I suppose," I answered and smiled. I hope to God it wasn't an awkward smile. I gotta go, though." "Oh, sure." He nodded and stepped back. I thanked him again and then moved away from there. The more I walked away, the faster my heart beat. I trembled with the hope that he would call me and tell me something, maybe introduce himself, but nothing of that kind happened. I entered the hotel and didn't hear anyone calling for me. Disappointment had never weighed so heavily on my shoulders before. In Hugh and Edward's hotel room, I was informed about a beach party that was soon to start. They said it would begin around midnight, and I told them we ought to prepare for it because it was already past 11:30. Hugh dismissed it with a wave of his hand. "We'll go when there's enough people," he said. "Yeah," Edward agreed. "So, you can hook up with someone." "You guys are allowed to forget about me," I told them, and laid down on one side of the bed. If I understood their intentions well, we wouldn't be leaving for the party until at least 1 o'clock. Edward poked a foot into my ribcage. I slapped it away. "Dude," he said, "our goal was to take some time for ourselves." He pointed at Hugh and himself. "Helping you is a part of that strategy." "I'm pretty sure I don't need that," I grumbled and pulled out my phone. You do, they replied in unison. I rolled my eyes at them and turned to the other side. I couldn't stop my smile, however. It was nice to have them around me. I could still chat with my bunch of people, but informing them of my sexuality unnerved me. I didn't want to take that chance. I still had final exams left, and dealing with that, on top of my friends who sincerely believed in my heterosexuality, was a headache I did not want to take. Besides, spending time with Hugh and Edward felt nice. It was almost as if they understood me better than I understood myself. We chatted a little, and before we knew it, we fell asleep. We finally awoke around 2 in the morning. Hugh and Edward hollered in surprise, claiming they didn't think their nap would last so long. We were also worried that the party would be soon over, even though that we could still hear faint music through the slightly ajar windows. There was no sign that it would end anytime soon, yet we hurried to dress ourselves up and left the room looking gravely ruffled and disorganized. Whoever was going to see us, I knew, would not be very pleased. "Guys," I said before we could leave, "I think I lost my AirPods. I checked my pocket, but I just couldn't find it." There was a moment of silence from their side. "William," Hugh said patiently, "as sad as that sounds, I believe we have a party to attend." He patted me on my shoulder. "We'll look for it tomorrow, I promise." "But," I said and bit my bottom lip, "it was expensive." "Tomorrow, I promise." "Did you lose both of them?" asked Edward on our way to the party. I shook my head and told him only the left one. We reached the place in less than 10 minutes and realized it was at its peak. There were so many people that we had to make an effort to stay close to one another. We were delighted and surprised at the twinkling sight of it. However, we had seen and been to several parties in college, but there was just something wild about this one. Everyone was an adult here and didn't shy away from behaving like one. Hugh and Edward looked more delighted than me, but all three of us were simply in awe. The music boomed like crazy, and we found ourselves in a little corner. We ordered our drinks and looked around the place as if in hope of finding a familiar face. Unfortunately, we couldn't find anyone. 10 minutes and several shots later, Hugh told me that Edward and he were going to the dance floor and asked me if I wanted to come. I told him that I didn't know how to dance. "It'll be fun," Hugh said and grabbed my arm. I would look silly dancing with my lanky limbs and zero dancing skills, and I had no intention to embarrass myself like that among so many people. "Come on," he said. "You'll give that guy something to look at." "What guy?" I asked, and he nodded in a direction. I had the decency to wait a moment to check him out, and when I did, I peered at the man over my glass. Oh my god, he was the guy from the beach. "Wait, what guy?" Hugh asked me. I had said that aloud. I stumbled into him," I said, and then informed both of my friends about how we met. Edward looked starstruck at me. "Wow," he said finally. "Now, that's a way to meet someone," Hugh whistled. "Go on, talk to him." I confidently shook my head. Forget the embarrassing way we met. I didn't know how to approach that guy. Besides, he would have long forgotten about me, but Hugh and Edward seemed to not think so. Before I could even understand, I saw Hugh finding his way to the man with 2 glasses in his hands. He talked to him about something, nodded a couple times at us, and then screamed at Edward to come over to the guy's table. Edward grinned at me, picked up his glass, and practically dragged me to the man's table. "It's time to know a man," he said. "This is William," Hugh said the moment we reached the table. "And William, this is Ryan." Then he pointed to the entirety of Ryan, the guy I met at the beach. The introductions were short, and then the silence around the table grew heavy. The awkward silence dissipated, though, when Ryan patted the space next to him. "You can sit here." Stupidly, I freaked out and decided to sit by my friend's side. I could sense an expression of surprise on Ryan's face, but he soon schooled his expression into a friendly one. Thankfully, nothing stopped the two parties present at the table from hitting it off immediately. We talked over the music, but made do with whatever we had. By the time half an hour had passed, Hugh and Edward had left for the dance floor, and so did the people who were with Ryan. Then it was only us, and silence. It didn't mean the world around us was silent, it was just that we didn't even speak a word. It felt like you could hear a pin drop. In this silence, I looked over at him. He was dressed a little more casually now. His first few buttons were left open, and the loose tie hung low on his neck. He had also rolled his shirt to his forearms. A display of open comfort in one's own skin. In my clothes, I looked overdressed, if not uncomfortable, but Ryan didn't seem to mind at all. Every time his eyes met mine, he smiled a dimpled smile and sipped on his drink. "Would you not like to dance?" he asked finally. The music had turned softer now, and I could see people slow dancing on it. It was romantic, and I felt my cheeks flushing at the thought of slow dancing with Ryan. I shook my head. "Not a dancer, or just shy?" he asked, and gave a soft laugh. To hear each other better, he shifted closer to me. "Here," he said. "I think you dropped it when we stumbled into each other. It's yours, right?" He slid my left AirPod to me. I gasped and thanked him for it. "I figured," he said, and smiled again. "What do you do?" I asked him, even though it was quite obvious. He pointed at himself. "Well, take a guess," he said, and huffed a laugh. "I work for a company, and it pays well." "Oh, is it a grind?" I asked, and made a face. He shrugged with a little smile. "Want some more drinks?" "Yeah." I couldn't remember what happened after that. We drank, and the next thing I remembered, I was waking up in a room that was not mine. Even in my sleep, I could hear something ringing, but I wasn't sure if it was my phone or my head. When I dared to open my eyes, I found a shirtless Ryan standing next to the bed. I nearly jumped out of my skin as my heartbeat picked up the pace. Did something happen last night that I couldn't remember? Fuck, I swore, and slapped a hand over my aching forehead. "Hey," Ryan said in a soft voice, "please, don't be scared. I did nothing. I didn't touch you or your friends." I followed his hand and found my friends sleeping like a log on the exact same bed. I sighed. We were all properly dressed, and I didn't feel anything out of the usual. "You guys passed out on us last night, and we didn't know your room numbers, so I had to bring you here." He grabbed something from the table and passed it to me. "Here, it'll help with your hangover." He backed away and sat down on the bench. "I slept here." "I'm so sorry," I said, and gulped down the tablet. "And thank you. I'm a light drinker. I don't know about my friends, though." "It's alright. A couple of my colleagues are light drinkers as well." He gestured to the bed. "You can go back to sleep if you'd like. I'll leave you guys, and I'll bring you something for you guys to eat." He was being unconditionally kind, and it felt rude to stay in bed after all that he did for me. "For us," I corrected myself. "It's alright." I made an effort to get up. "I'll come with you." "Are you sure?" he asked. "Yes, let's go." Hugh and Edward decided to talk about it 2 days later. "I'm never drinking again," Hugh announced with conviction. "I will not risk us again like that. What if it was someone bad?" We all shivered at the thought of that. "But we don't have to worry about that, because it was Ryan," Edward provided. "Oh, right," Hugh agreed, his tone sounding as if he was building up a conspiracy. I blushed. "I don't want to talk about him." "Do you think he would have helped us if not for William?" Hugh asked Edward. "He would have been a nice person regardless." Hugh clapped his hands together. "Now that man is handsome. He seemed nice too, if I remember right." "He was," Hugh agreed. "What do you want me to do about that?" I groaned. It wasn't like I was trying to find him and talk to him. "Talk to him," they provided unhelpfully. "And how am I supposed to do that?" I asked in return. "Well, look for opportunities," they told me. And so I did just that. The opportunity came just the day after. It was late evening and somewhere around 9 o'clock. Hugh and Edward had just left me to keep up with their honeymoon phase, and I was left alone to stroll along the mostly empty beachside. I wasn't exactly on a hunt to find a man. Heck, if the way I felt about Ryan was correct, something could potentially start from there. And I hoped something did, because I could see the man across the road in casuals and with a guitar on his lap. Hell, if this wasn't the hottest sight I could imagine. Flustered and as if in a trance, I found my feet covering the distance that separated us. It took me less than 2 minutes. I stood outside the window and watched him interact with the guitar strings and the staff around the place. It was wine and dining, and there weren't a lot of people around. It would probably start filling up soon, though. When Ryan looked outside and found me, he waved a hello and asked me to come in. I flushed with embarrassment at being caught, but decided to take on the suggestion of my friends. I told myself everything was okay as long as no outsider knew about it. "Hey," he said, "could you please hold this for me?" He passed me his guitar. "I'm just gonna ask the staff to set up a table for you near me." He did so and returned with 2 staff members. I was impressed, but just didn't know what to say. He removed the jacket he'd been wearing and rolled up the sleeves of his Henley. He was the perfect picture of the aristocracy. It would make so much sense if he confessed he belonged to some sort of royal family. I asked them if they allowed outsiders to play for their audience, and they told me that we were all welcome. He leaned closer. "I just had to prove I could play," we laughed. He pointed at me. "You make up a good subject with a guitar, you know." I handed him his guitar when he stretched a hand. "You click?" "Painting," he answered, and over his voice I could hear customers piling in the area. There would soon be a crowd for Ryan to play his music for. "You paint?" "Used to," he answered, "but, adulting sucks." But I took his words as my compliment. "I made up a good subject for a painting," said a painter. "That was nice to hear. I hope you can soon," I sincerely said. I would love to watch him paint for hours on end. "I'm beginning to feel I've found a reason," he looked at me, and if it weren't for the softness in his eyes, I would have thought he meant someone else. But no, it was for me. He said that to me. "Now please, take your seat and let me play." I settled on the table exclusively set up for me. I was the closest to him and could see every shift in his expression and body. It was simply enthralling, and he had me wrapped around his finger, and if I'm gonna be honest, it wasn't that scary of a feeling, at least not in private. After that evening, I had every right to believe our next meeting would be something just as cute. After all, who wouldn't want a handsome man to play guitar and spend the next several hours just randomly chatting with the hope of understanding each other better? But that was not my fate, because the next time I saw him, he was drowning. I saw him first, and when I ran towards the open waters, Hugh and Edward followed after me to make sure I was alright. But I was panicking and used all the tricks and lessons I had learned during my swimming lessons throughout my life. Ryan was taller and heavier than me, and with him being unconscious when I got a hold of him, it was difficult to drag him to the beachside. It was way too cold, and my body was freezing. It was almost as if I was dying. When he didn't open his eyes, I checked for his chest and his mouth. His breathing was fickle, but he was still alive. I carefully placed my hand on his chest and pushed gently. I could hear my friends and people around me calling for help. I knew they would come soon, but I didn't want to take any chances. When his pulse stopped, I felt nothing less than terrified. I must have been screaming something at my friends before I dipped down to do what I was taught. I performed CPR. For seconds, it looked like he just wouldn't move, but then he did. Thankfully, by then, the ambulance had arrived. Hugh grabbed me and dragged me away from there. I must have been hysterically crying because he wouldn't shut up that Ryan would be okay. The next time I was conscious of my surroundings, I was in Hugh's and Edward's room. I asked him if there was any news about Ryan. He replied that he was okay, thanks to me. He could have died, I told him, and my fingers trembled. Hugh carefully took the glass from my hands. "Well, he's alive, thanks to you. His colleagues are there with him, and so is Edward. He'll inform us about his progress." "But," I began and swallowed hard. None of this was supposed to happen. From what I knew about myself, the only trouble was supposed to be me and my doubtful disposition in our potential relationship, not whatever the heck that was. What was Ryan doing there anyway, and how did he drown? "He'll be okay," he repeated patiently. "I need you to rest, William." "I want to tell you something, Hugh," I began. I don't hate that I'm gay. I didn't know what I was saying or why I was saying it, but it came out of my mouth anyway. I don't hate myself for that. I'm afraid, sure, but I do not hate myself for that." "I know, William. I've wanted to kiss Ryan since the moment I first saw him, and every time after that, but everything I do is fucking stupid. Maybe if I had kissed him, I would have known. I could have stopped it." "It's not your fault, Jesus," Hugh said. "I'm not saying it is." I stopped and sighed. Was that not what I was trying to say? Besides, there were rarely any opportunities for us to kiss in private. We were usually in public. "I don't know," I admitted at last. Whatever happened had terrified me enough to give me an anxiety attack. Would it be wrong for me to believe that I cared for him so much that that was why I reacted the way I did? Hugh didn't find any fault in the logic, and neither did I. And that terrified me. What if I ruined this opportunity the same way I ruined it with Hugh? I trembled with fear. I didn't want to lose Ryan, nor did I know how to tackle my fear. "How did you—" I began and cleared my throat. "Get over your fear." "Of being gay?" "Of people finding out," I corrected. Even before I had met and kissed Hugh, I knew I liked boys. I wasn't afraid to admit it to myself, but I was afraid for the world to know it. And when I thought I didn't care for them, it was too late. Hugh was now with Edward, the only person who seemed to care for him in the college. Hugh shrugged. Honestly, I don't remember. I've always kind of known, I guess. Besides, I didn't think I owed anyone any explanations. The world shouldn't care if I like boys, or girls, or both, or neither. It's none of their business. Then he softened. But that's not the case with everyone. Not everyone will come to terms with the fear the same way I did. You'll have to find your way, William. And how will I do that? I asked. My voice sounded small. It was almost as if I were a little baby and in need of guidance from an older brother. You like being with Ryan, right? He said, and I nodded. Does that make you happy? When I nodded, he sat by my side. But how can you be sure that it would work out? You guys haven't even known each other a month. I just feel it's right. Then why feel fear in embracing what feels right? He held my hand. You can't be sure things will work out great between you two, but what's stopping you from trying? Try giving it a chance. Why waste your happiness in such a harsh world? It will always find fault in you. Are you sure about Edward and you being a thing? I asked him. He shrugged. We've been best friends for so long, so the transition wasn't that weird. We've realized that we've always kind of lived like a couple. He turned to me with a smile. The only thing missing was kisses and... Okay, I get it. Jeez, I laughed. Let him know what you feel, William. What's the worst that could happen? Well, in my opinion, many things could go wrong. For one, I could freak out and ruin everything. When Ryan returned, he didn't know it was I who had saved his life. I wouldn't fault anyone else for it, though. I had specially requested Hugh and Edward to make up a lie that it was not me, but some random man, because no one knew us, and it was quickly sold. And so, Ryan didn't know what happened. That didn't mean we didn't spend time together, however. After he recovered, he decided to play for Wine and Dine again. I was with him, so I watched him perform and entered his audience. They seemed to know what he was doing and playing. I did not. So, when I asked Ryan if he could teach me something about guitar, he agreed. During those moments, I would either return late to my room, or Hugh and Edward would leave me alone with Ryan, without saying a word. At night, our group chat would be filled with lots of corny and horny messages. It all made me happy. It even made me feel as if I belonged there. That was why when Ryan shared the problem with me, I didn't find it shocking. He said it was his estranged mom. They had separated long before Ryan turned 18. His mom was abusive, so there was no love lost between them. But now she was on her deathbed, and Ryan suddenly didn't know how to take it into account. Sure, she was abusive and manipulative, but she's my mom, he said. He sighed and placed the guitar on the sand. He didn't care for it at the moment. Are you gonna meet her? I asked. I don't know, he answered, and he sounded sincere about it. Should I? It was a rhetorical question. I didn't need to answer that. He swallowed. Have you ever had that kind of relative? I shook my head. No, I answered. Is that why I began, my heart thumping in my chest? You tried to... But I just couldn't finish my sentence. The very thought of that day frightened me. Oh, if you're worried that I tried killing myself, that was not the case. He looked at me. I will not kill myself over something like that, no matter how rude and mean that sounds. He laughed a little at that. I'm gonna get scarred for life, sure, but not death, nah. I have a lot to see and feel. He slowly looked at my mouth and then into my eyes. I have a lot to experience, he said, and sighed, looking up into the night sky. I swallowed. There was no denying what he meant. It was a mutual thing. Ryan wanted to kiss me just as much as I wanted to kiss him. I looked around the place and found no one near us. I could see a couple, but they were far away. If they looked at us, then they wouldn't know what we were doing. Kiss me, I told him. He turned to look at me as if in shock by the demand, but it didn't take long to wear off. He grabbed the guitar, placed it on his other side before he held my cheek and kissed me. Did we do anything more than kiss that night? No. Well, maybe. But under the cool winds, we did a lot more kissing than I'd ever done in my life. So, Hugh began, what's up? Nothing, I answered and flipped through the magazine. Hugh snapped it out of my hands. Edward saw you two kissing. He said it looked like you two needed a room. He's lying, I said, even though the blush on my face proved me wrong. He narrowed his eyes at me and then shifted a little. Edward and I are going somewhere, he said and cleared his throat. Okay, I told him. We asked someone to keep you safe, though, he whispered. What does that mean? Nothing, he answered and called after Edward. Let's go. The movie will start in about 10 minutes. "Why are you not taking me?" I asked. They merely smiled and left. No sooner had they left than I received a knock on my door. It was Ryan. I couldn't fathom how he found out my room number, but I knew that this must have been Hugh and Edward's doing. Even though I was nervous, I welcomed him. Since that evening at the beach, we had kissed several times, and we were a lot closer than we were on the first day. Yet I still felt shy around him. He looked around the room and said, "Nice." I laughed at that. "I'm sorry, are you okay?" he asked. "Why wouldn't I be? Your friend said..." "Oh," Ryan said. "A ruse," he chimed. "Yeah, they're always like that." I pointed at the bag in his hand. "What's that?" "Oh," he said, and pulled out a notebook. I didn't have anything, so this is my serving as my sketchbook. He showed me several drawings that he had recently finished, and then he showed me page after page of my portrait. I gasped and fingered through each. It was almost as if he had caught every detail of my face. "That's me." He shrugged and looked at me. When I couldn't control myself, I kissed him, and that was how we slept together for the first time. When it was said and done, he told me Edward had told him the truth. He knew it was I who had saved him. With a smile broad enough to light up the entire world, he kissed me. When I woke up next, Hugh and Edward were sitting and whispering on my couch. I quickly checked if I was properly covered, and then muttered a lot. "What the heck, guys?" "Sorry," they said in unison. "We just wanted to make sure you're good." I rolled my eyes over at their giggling. "Where's Ryan?" "Oh," Edward said. "He left." "His boss called," Hugh provided when my expression twisted. "Guys," I said. "He's leaving," Edward said finally. "Their vacations are over. Back to business, or whatever the bullshit he was spewing." Beside him, Hugh thinned his lips. I sat up on the bed and winced at the dull ache. "What did he say?" "They'll leave tomorrow," Edward said, "and he hopes you wouldn't be too upset to meet him one last time. He has things to tell you." I was hurt. I just couldn't deny it. In anger, I meanly asked my friends to leave me alone. When they said that I could tell them whatever, I threatened to leave the room. They sighed and left me alone. I crawled under my bed and cried. I didn't wake up to bid Ryan goodbye. Several times I could hear him outside the room, but I didn't wake up to say anything. I stayed in bed until I received Hugh's message that Ryan had left. I grabbed my phone and scrolled through several pictures I'd taken of us. As I cried, my fingers struggled to delete the pictures. I didn't have Ryan's number, his address, or even his company's name. I didn't know anything more than what he had told me, and these pictures were the last reminder that he had even come into my life. I could not delete them, so I switched off my phone and fell back into a pitiful sleep. Days turned into weeks, and I received no news from Ryan. He was virtually gone from my life. Soon, the time to leave came. Our exams were on our heads, and we decided we need to get out of vacation fever to properly focus on our studies. Several times, Hugh and Edward tried to talk to me. I brushed off their efforts each time until I could not. It was Valentine's Day, and I felt fucking alone. I watched Edward propose to Hugh in front of their parents. We were all happy. I knew even if sometimes things would be a little awkward between those two, they would remain in love. But as the night rolled to an end, I could no longer ignore the harrowing sadness inside me. I wanted to talk to Ryan. Even if it was to swear at him, I needed to hear him speak, talk, play, and kiss me. It was a new kind of desperation, and I could no longer fight it. When Hugh and Edward noticed, they suggested I contact him. I told them I didn't have his number. They looked at me in various states of shock before they broke out into loud swearings. Even though it was a tense moment, it was kind of funny. They cared so much about me, and I loved them for it. "Idiot," Hugh said, and set up a new Twitter account. And no, it was not X. I refused to call it X. This was our way. We would set up a new account on Twitter with my name and a picture. I would put up a tweet after tweet, hoping someone would help me find the man I was looking for. At first, we didn't gather any attention. Then a few people found my tweets and retweeted them, and then some more did. I put up pictures I'd taken of us, but nothing happened. For weeks, there was nothing from a man named Ryan. I lost hope. Our exams came and went, and we passed and started hunting for jobs. Nothing came. Until it did. Sometime in August, when I had nearly given up on ever finding him, I received a DM. It was from Ryan. It was set up 4 years ago, and it looked real. I checked out messages, and we realized it was us. We talked and talked and talked until we shared our numbers, and then we talked some more. We wouldn't stop talking, it was that bad. Hugh and Edward set up a date spot for us. We met, We kissed, and I told him I wanted to be with him. I told him I didn't care for what happened to us in the future, but I wanted to give it a chance. Fucking idiots, Hugh said and clicked our picture. We all laughed, and it was the happiest sound I'd ever heard. Halloween was here, and Hugh insisted we dress up as pairs. We did. New Year's soon rolled in, and we were at the shared apartment of Hugh and Edward. There was a small crowd of our friends, not mine, however. The countdown began, and as everyone counted the numbers, Hugh and Edward got into each other's arms. Ryan turned to me. "Hey," he said, smiling. "Hey, boyfriend," I said. And at the scream of, "Happy New Year, losers!" I kissed him. Ryan and I officially started dating. For months after that, I decided to keep my relationship a secret. I didn't think I was ready to face the world with such a thing. Then, things changed. I met Ryan's parents and they were welcoming. They gave me confidence, and I came out to my parents and introduced them to Ryan. It was a happy meeting, and they immediately fell in love with him. Hugh and Edward were doing better than ever. Sure, there were some arguments here and there, but what relationship doesn't have those? And besides, those losers always made up in the end, and it was a good thing. I liked seeing them together. The end. Surely, taking a chance is all that you can do, so what's stopping you? What's your fear? Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing to become a part of our Rainbow Force, and stay wholesome.